Hi, Kim. Thanks for being on the show today.
Hey, Lisa, we're glad to be here.
Yeah, you were on quite a couple of years ago talking about your rescue and the job that you do. And I saw you posted on Facebook the other day your recertification and the things you have to do as a search tech canine handler. But also, you talked about wilderness first aid kit, all these things that I want to cover in the show today because so many people who watch this show know exactly what you're talking about. And if they don't, they need to for when they go out into the wilderness and hike in our areas and different things like that. So, thank you for being here.
Well, you're welcome. And you live in a beautiful area. So, I'd be out there too. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things we'll get to is, a lot of times when you're on a search, if there's someone carries these things with them and knows how to take care of themselves, you get a little time. It's a little less pressure, not knowing what's happened to them, but knowing that they can at least adapt and maybe make some decisions that would have to be made in an emergency. So let's first of all start with your history because you've been a veterinarian for now 36 years.
Correct. Yeah.
36
Yep.
years. You're in your exit strategy from the clinic that you've recently sold, and you'll be retiring here soon. I've known you for a long time, since I was in college, a long time ago.
Hey,
You were the veterinarian to my dog, to Wesley's and my dog, Huck. So
you're right.
we go way back. Thanks for being here. So let's talk about that. So you always wanted to be a veterinarian, and I think a lot of kids grow up saying that's what they want to be because they love animals, but there's a lot more to it than loving animals.
Oh, that's for sure. And that is true. When I was 10 years old, I decided, and I don't think it's unusual, right? Some of us know what we want to be from, you knew you wanted to be a writer. I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian from a very young age and have been blessed to be able to, have that career, a career I love, and, a career that takes me into people's daily lives. I've had clients who now I treat their grandkids' dogs. So, it's quite a journey together.
That's amazing. I've called you for advice over the years too. We just spent 10 minutes talking about my son Hunter's new black lab before we even got started recording. So one of the things too that you shared before we started recording was about the stories. Your mom was an RN, and the stories of the many times where you saw having these skills saved lives or saved fingers, different things like that since you were very young too.
Oh, that's correct. And we lived on a small street, dead end street, 16 houses, but everybody knew that, mom, she was a nurse, and so she was the go-to for the emergency on the street or even within our family. But, I saw her numerous times just calmly, step into action when, the neighborhood teenage boy was mowing our next door neighbor's lawn and cut his finger off. And, mom was calmly, walking him through that, taking care step by step, what needed to be done to stop the bleed and get him calmed down and then run next door to find the finger. I mean, she
Well, and
she
he ran
was.
to your house when it happened.
Oh, exactly. And my mom hears this, pounding on the door. Probably the first time. My twin sister and I were very young. We were 4 years old, and my little sister became very ill. And my mom was, trying to call the doctor, and the doctor was out of town. And my sister went into respiratory arrest at home, and mom immediately started CPR, and dad and mom and Kathleen jumped in the car, and she was able to revive her. But she was diagnosed with encephalitis. So, but it was that skill set that Kathleen was able to survive that respiratory crisis at home. Later, Kathleen had residual seizures from having had viral encephalitis. And at a young age, my twin and I were taught this is what you do if Kathleen has a seizure. These are the steps you go through, and you stay calm while you're doing it. So I had that role model, my whole life. And sometimes it was other places. Christmas Eve one night, we were late. Mom and I were late for service, and we hear this kind of quiet moaning kind of call for help. And it was below freezing. And a friend of hers, a church friend, had slipped under a car and had a compound fracture of her ankle. And she was, had she stayed out there for an hour and 15 minutes with an open fracture, you know being the age she was, there's no telling if she would have survive the evening. And again, Mom went into action and, did what she needed to do to secure her, get her warm, and had me do the running to get, to the phone and call 911. We didn't have cell phones back then. So,
Sure, sure,
yeah,
exactly. And
yeah,
nor satellite phones and the things that people have access to now when they're in the wilderness and all these other things that they have a way to try to stay safer, to make good decisions. And so when you were coming up and you decided, okay, I want to be a veterinarian, we talked about how a lot of people have that dream, but it's not necessarily an easy road. Um,
right.
you've had a practice for many years, and that was that a goal too?
Do you have a practice?
Hmm.
Be a practice? Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I worked right out of vet school for 3 years for a great practice in San Antonio, and then did some relief work for about 18 months, and then met another veterinarian here in College Station when we moved here. And both she and I decided, we'd rather work for ourselves and do the type of practice we wanted. We also wanted to be able to mentor college students so they could see, do I want to do this for a living? Is this, get in the trenches with us? Do you want to do this? And that's something my practice still does. I've had 40 technicians, employees that have become vets, but I've also had hundreds of students that have volunteered in my practice that are veterinarians now.
Well, you mentioned you live in College Station, which is where Texas A&M University is, where I went to college, and it's known for its veterinarian
Right.
programs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things too, we'll take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the black lab you currently have. Tell me his name again, because I always say it wrong.
Seamus.
Seamus.
Yeah.
You have him, and part of his energy is what
Right.
got you into the search work. So let's take a break. We'll
Exactly.
come back. We'll talk about the search work and also give some real specific advice for people, even what the wilderness first aid kit looks like. Because I was looking at some of the pictures that you posted, and your husband was a great sport. And the pictures that you had to show through your recertification and the things that you had to use from what would be used in the wilderness as a kit. And I think it's good for people to see that and know what are the things that you pack to make sure you're okay no matter what happens. So, well, you're better off no matter what.
Right.
Let's say
You
that.
plan for what you can at
Yeah,
least. Yeah.
exactly. Okay, we'll be back in just a moment. We're back talking with Kim Stewart, veterinarian of many, many years, 3+ decades, 3.5+ decades. And we're talking about your rescue work. So your dog, Seamus, you've had many black labs and animals and different things in your life. And this dog had a lot of energy, and you decided that you needed to give him a way to burn off that energy. So that's when you started getting into the search work that you do now. And it's been
Right.
a while now. How long have you been doing that?
8 years. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Mhm.
So you got into that not only, to do that with your dog, but also having an interest in probably expanding your knowledge and how you can use that because you're also an outdoorsy person.
Right. Exactly. And so search and rescue, dogs are used to find people in the wilderness, whether they're lost or missing. And, missing often means we presume that they may be deceased, but we have to bring everybody home. And so, nobody does that better than a dog. They literally use their nose, not their eyes. They use their nose, and they can smell miles and miles with their nose compared to where we can see and what they can see. And it also allowed me to, be in the woods with my dog, be in the wilderness, but also, give back to the community. He gets his exercise. We create a bond. That bond takes us, out into the wilderness and the situation, and we, help families that are really needing, to have their loved one, reunited or at least brought home.
And so when you have this work that you do, you're not ever searching for criminals. So you're not trying to find someone that way. You're searching for people who may be injured in the wilderness, that sort of thing. And you're not limited just to where you are. You're throughout Texas, but you've been to other states you mentioned before, like Mississippi and different things when we
Right.
talked off there.
And our certification process, he's certified as a working canine through the International Police Working Dog Association. So it's an international certification. He could search anywhere in the world. We just have to be called in by law enforcement. We do not self-deploy, and we don't just show up somewhere. So, and that also helps us to be not putting ourselves in harm's way. We don't want to be looking for someone that they may be distraught, they may have a weapon, or there could be a criminal, part to the
That's somebody
missing.
else's job to do.
Right, right.
So when you think about what you thought it would be like compared to what it is, how has it met or exceeded your expectation, the work that you get to do, the reward of it
Uh,
as well, and obviously sometimes the heartache of it too?
Right. Yeah, it is, far exceeded, what I thought it would be. Definitely just the people I've met and the amazing dogs, the other amazing dogs I've met. Yes, the stories, especially because I do human remains detection with my dog. So who we are looking for someone who's believed to be deceased. So some of the stories are hard. Some of the stories, though, are helping to bring home a victim who has, been killed, been murdered. And so there is definitely reward in that.
The
You
closure that
know,
you offer. Hmm.
yeah. And oftentimes people are like, well, what does that do to your thinking, to your psyche? I guess being a veterinarian and being medically oriented, I am very good at putting things where they need to be and putting things into perspective. It doesn't bother me, to see a deceased person, though that is something that, you need to ask yourself and you need to remind yourself that it might not bother you today or next week, but it could bother you next year. So, you have to know yourself and know that there are people you can talk to if that if and when that becomes a problem you want to make sure you address.
Now, when you say, so when you got into this, did your medical background help, or can anyone get certified in this if they go through the training and succeed in that training?
For wilderness first aid or for
For the rescue as well, either
the
one.
rescue as well. I think the rescue, there are some parts of rescue that was harder for me, and part of it is some of the terminology they use in search and rescue. A lot of that's FEMA based, and so some of the terminology that they use for incident command and how you organize a search, and who's in charge, and then some of the geospatial technology that's used, GPS and mapping and other ways that they locate people through, using software. A lot of that was, you know, new to me. I've never heard those, a lot of those, that terminology. I think the part of search and rescue also is if you like, being physical, you like being outdoors, you exercise a lot and you're fit, which, fortunately I've been able to stay fit. That helped me. I didn't have to get in shape physically, because I had a high, energy lab that I had to, walk or run every day. So yeah, he helped me already be in shape. So, I had that going for me. And then I think the medical part of it, when we train, when we're working with training substances, so we use, someone might donate a bone from a hip replacement, or we might use teeth or placenta, or whatever we might use. But knowing, sterile technique, it's kind of reverse sterile technique, but you have to understand if you're handling hazardous waste to train a dog, you have to understand, it's kind of like reverse sterile technique. You have to handle stuff safely and you don't have to put yourself at risk. And so that is ingrained in veterinarians. We deal with zoonotic disease all the time. So that wasn't new to me. So I think for the most part, and then the other thing that has helped me is because I'm a veterinarian, say we find skeletal remains, I know what animal remains look like. I can identify, no, that's a dog, or that's a deer, or that's a cow.
Not a
It's
person.
not human, not a person. So that has probably been one of the big advantages as well. It sounds
'Cause
morbid,
you could
but
really get off the beaten path, so to
oh,
speak, thinking you
right.
found something you didn't. Yeah.
And of course, a good dog is, they know right away. No, the dog knows right away that it's not human.
Fascinating.
They're not going to care about it. So
Okay.
that helps too, to trust. You have a dog that you trust.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break, and then I want to get back to that wilderness first aid kit.
Sure.
The advice that you can give to my audience who lives in a place where, there's a lot of hiking, there's a lot of excursions, there's a lot of adventurous folks, and we can give them the best advice that you have to offer. So we'll be back in just a moment. Kim, we're wrapping up with you talking about, got to the part with the wilderness kit, the first aid kit for people, who are going out on a hike. Does it matter how long you're going to be gone? All these kinds of things I want to ask you just build up to where we get to the kit. So people who go on day hikes, there's a recommendation for that because you never know, it could turn into an overnight hike, right? That's why they have an emergency kit, things you can't predict. So how do you base it on? Obviously, there's some hikes we could go here that are very commercial, very local. There's people passing by all day long. You would be able to get out, you'd be able to get help. So your bag can be a little lighter in those situations, likely. But at what point do you decide, okay, this is a hike? Is it distance? Is it isolation? How do you decide what you take with you based on where you're going?
Well, the majority of injuries that happen on a hike are day hikers. They're not the people that are going backpacking into the wilderness for 5 days. It's the day hiker. And the actual number of wilderness emergencies has actually increased since COVID. They don't know why that is, but the experienced hiker that is out there for 4 or 5 days are not usually the person that they are rescuing.
So, but likely maybe it's just more people are getting out there and maybe picked up a new hobby during that time, right?
Right, that could be.
Yeah, our parks increased and all those outdoor activities. But so then so the day hiker then, unless you're going on a local hike, like we have a hike here, like Saddle Rock is a place where people go and they're there all day. Like you're not going out into the wilderness one bit, you're just going on a local hike.
Right.
So when you're deciding when you're going to go into the woods and you're going to take this hike, and even if it's a trail that's pretty well traveled, you could find yourself there later in the afternoon than most people. The traffic might be lighter for whatever reason. So what are you taking with you that's part of this kit that is based on the idea that, like you said, you don't have to be going into the wilderness for 5 days to need to have a wilderness.
Right. So, the most common injuries in the wilderness are, cuts, lacerations, and broken bones. Okay. So if your laceration or, cut is deep enough, the biggest thing is some way to stop the bleed. And so you definitely want to have gauze or padding and extra padding more than you'd think to stop a bleed. As far as broken bones go, an ace bandage goes a long way. And an ace bandage, whether it's a wrist or an ankle or even a knee, an ace bandage, even a shoulder, if you need to make a sling, can go a long way to at least try to stabilize and the injury until the person can either walk out or be evacuated out. And also, medical tape, some sort of, white medical tape, a bandana, or even just a big piece of triangular cloth that you could use to make a tourniquet around your leg, a tourniquet around your arm, you could use for a sling, anything like that. Just a triangular or a square piece of cloth can go a long way. As far as tourniquets go, there are great tourniquets that you can purchase as well online, especially if you're hiking by yourself. It's easier to apply a tourniquet that's made for a purpose than trying to tie something on yourself, especially if your injury is to an arm. A space blanket or a tarp that has a reflective side on it. So that, the space blankets aren't super heavy. I carry the tarp instead that's reflective on one side and red or royal blue on the other. Royal blue is a color that doesn't occur in nature. So royal blue is a good color to have. It shows up. It's noticed by search and rescue people. They know that's not a naturally occurring color. The reflective, can help as a signal, right? You can use that for warmth. You can use it if you get caught in a hailstorm, the tarps, because they're heavier, or if you're, being pummeled by rain. It can also be heavy enough that if you needed to make a litter or kind of a stretcher for somebody, you could. So that's why I like the reflective tarps a little bit better than just the space blankets, because space blankets aren't very thick.
It has more purpose it can serve. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is to have something that you can irrigate. Now, they may say take a bottle of saline, but I just want to make sure that I have a nozzle on a drinking bottle that you can you put pressure on that drinking bottle and get high, velocity force coming out of
As
there.
opposed
So
to just pouring water over the top of
right,
something from your
exactly. So
regular
you
water.
don't waste, right. You don't waste as much water. You can irrigate. If you get something in your eye, you can irrigate a wound just with water. And so I think that comes, it's handy, and, it can be also something to carry extra water for you. As far as medications, Benadryl, obviously, antihistamine, you definitely want to bring aspirin. And people say, why aspirin? Well, it's amazing how many people have a cardiac event when they're hiking. Aspirin is, you want to give that immediately. Obviously non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen, which is, Motrin or Advil, is always worth taking with you. And maybe and I'm just talking like a few doses of each of them,
Right.
and also Imodium, especially if you're going to be somewhere where you might be drinking water that isn't water you've packed in. A couple doses of Imodium, and then some people like Tylenol, which Tylenol has its place as well for fever or for pain. So that's kind of the medicine. You always want to have plenty of bandage material for blisters, and the sunscreen is still really high on the list, and you always want to have that, in your pack.
We have just 1:20 left, and I wanted to know, when is the time to evacuate? That was one thing I wanted to make sure we cover, which is that 1 minute left.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's several scenarios to evacuate. Obviously, if anyone is having a cardiac event, right? If anyone is having an allergic reaction and they have not responded, even if they have responded to an EpiPen that they need to be evacuated. The EpiPen can wear off. So you've got to get them out. Of course, anyone who's had a seizure for the first time needs to be evacuated, or who has altered mental state, because that could be anything. With fractures, if it's a compound fracture, which means it's open, the skin is broken, those people are not going to walk on that fracture, especially if it's on the leg. Spine injury or brain injury, they have to be evacuated. And of course, anyone that's in any shock, and there's many causes of shock, and sometimes evacuation means, if you're the only one around to help, that you need to somehow stabilize that person and run for help, or run to where you can get a cell signal. Yeah. So one of the things too is always let someone know, hey, I'm hiking today.
Right.
I'm going by myself. This is where I'm going to be. If you don't hear from me by this time of night, I'll check in, but if you
otherwise it's the next day when you're supposed to meet your friend for lunch at 2:00 before they even notice you're not there. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
All of this is such good information. I need to have you on again and again, because there's just more to talk about. Right.
There always is,
yeah,
be
there
prepared.
Always is. But I think this is a good baseline. I think it's a good baseline, and I'll list all these things out in the show notes so people can get that list and know what that is. And we have resources now, right? We can look online for this stuff, but sometimes it's just important to hear it reiterated by someone like yourself. So thank you for being here, Kim.